Welcome to the online teaching ministry of Pastor Rob Ginter and Farmdale Baptist Church. For more content, visit us online at farmdalebaptist.com.
It's been a minute since I've talked to him, but I have a friend, and his name is Flip Flop. And you can imagine why his name's Flip Flop. Besides that's what he wears. Always. Always and forever. No matter what the weather, flip-flops. Pedicures on the feet, flip-flops. 6 inches of snow. Any guess? Flip-flops. Flip-flops in those things. I later on figured out his real name. But regardless of the weather, he stands the same. Some days that makes him look smart. Other days, that makes him look foolish. Because you don't want to be wearing flip-flops in 6 inches of snow. You don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense because what's going on around him. Now, I say that as we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and he begins to tell us that life is a lot like the weather, and it changes all the time. And you don't want to be there missing the moment while you have the moment. You don't want to be late when you could be seizing the moment. At press time, my wife is not pregnant. But there was a viral post that continued to spread like a virus this past week because somebody saw a cute picture of us from 4 years ago and was like, oh, that's great. So they liked it, but it just so happened to be a pregnancy announcement. So people are commenting on this and being like, congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. And we're like, thanks. He's going to be 4, So they're like, the season has passed, but everybody is just jumping on that train about 4 years too late. And we don't want to actually do that in our life to where we don't change with the weather or that we miss the season after it's over and it's too late. There are real consequences in that because what happens then? Grumbling that the weather that we are now in is not where we want to be. Did you ever meet anybody that lived in Kentucky but hated the snow? A couple people might be here, I'm talking to you, do you hate that? Well, it's just kind of how it is here. And that's one thing when you can go get a coat, but it's another thing when your life is like that and you feel stuck and you're in pain and you're suffering and you go, and somebody comes to you and just like, think about better days when you weren't hurting. That's not helpful at all because all I can think about right now is the situation right in front of me and I feel stuck here. So that's why we need Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 15. So we can make sense of life under the sun in the here and now. That's what Solomon helps us with in beginning in chapter 3, after 2 chapters of telling us what matters, what doesn't matter, and why it does matter. You know what he says doesn't matter? Nothing matters. You know what matters? Everything that you get from the hand of God. And why does it matter? Because it is from God. So beginning here, he helps us to make sense of life under the sun. Beginning in verse 1, he says, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. There are seasons for everything you go through. If you've lived for any amount of time, there's going to be an ebb and flow to your life. In my looser, wilder theology days, there was a pastor that I heard preach on this text, and he said, speak to the pain that you're feeling right now and say, you are subject to change. Speak to the storm that you're in right now and say, you are subject to change. But if you began in chapter 3, verse 1, and you just keep reading, you can speak to your pain and say, you're subject to change. But you can also speak to your pleasure and say, you're subject to change. You can speak to the terrible thing in front of you and say, you're subject to change. But you might also have to speak to your health and say, you're subject to change. Or your house, you're subject to change. Or your job, you're subject to change. If you say that to your spouse, don't pin it on me. It's not my fault. I didn't even say that, Don't say that to your spouse. But your kids won't, you get the point though, right? Your kids won't always be little. Your spouse might not always be alive. The good things and the bad things that you go through, they are subject to change. All of them. And Solomon says, when we're trying to figure out what matters here under the sun, that in your life, for everything under the sun, there is a pattern. There's a pattern. There's a pattern for it, of good and bad, ebb and flow, sickness, birthdays, marriages, funerals. That's what he's doing here. That's what he's doing. So, what does this pattern look like? Look at verse 2. There's a time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. If you notice, the thing that colors all of those is time. Verse 1 says there's a season. So in verse 1 we notice that there are time limits on the variety of things that we experience. There's time limits here. These are polar opposites. There's a time to be born and a time to die, plant, harvest, 7 pairs from the cradle to the grave here in this passage. He says there's a time for everything in the human experience. And as I'm looking at this, I would rather be born than die, plant than pluck up. I don't know about that one. Right? If you're looking at it, I'd rather kill. No, I would rather heal than kill. I want half of these, not the other half of these. And you do too. You want half of it. But what he's saying here is that it's all going to be there. And Solomon isn't reinventing the wheel here. Your mama said there'd be days like this. And there'd be days like this because of information that you got from your mama. She said there'd be days like this. It's going to happen. The things that you're planting right now, one day you're going to have to pluck them up. Things that you're keeping right now, one day you're going to have to cast them away. And let me tell you what's not happening here. This is not a prescription, right? To where you go to Longhorn and they overcooked your steak, so you quote Ecclesiastes 3 and say there's a time for war. Where is the manager? I need to talk to your supervisor. I need to talk to them. No, that's not what this is. What he's saying is things are changing, and a lot of the time, you're not going to be able to control it. You recognize that these seasons are like weather that you are not the sender of here. But we don't want to be like flip-flop, in which that the season we're in, we can't recognize it until we're too late. So we take what is in front of us for granted. And we're not grateful. We're not thankful. We don't want to be like flip-flop, and he's wearing those no matter what. Half the time miserable, half the time happy. We want to know what's in front of us and take advantage of it. We don't want to be the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. We don't. We don't have to be comfortable in these seasons. We just have to understand what's called for there. So that's what he's telling us, like that there's a pattern of things. Life under the sun, nothing's new under the sun, right? But here's something that's just going to keep going like the weather. There's going to be funerals and births. There's going to be planting, plucking up. There's going to be killing and healing that goes on down here. He goes on in verse 5, there's times to cast away stones. This is either talking about the ancient Near Eastern practice of soldiers going into a territory, occupying them, and planting gravel in their gardens. Or, as one rabbi put it, the intimacy that occurs in a bedroom between a husband and wife. I prefer to think it's the second one, but I have little evidence of either one. But you want to know what's going on in your life, know when it's changing, and change with it. We've all experienced the pain of this. I was there when they took the keys from my grandfather. Maybe you've experienced that. He didn't want him to. He reluctantly handed him over. He didn't want that season to be over. We have to know that things are going to be like this. There's a time to seek and a time to give up looking for that because you're going to be late for church. There's a time to collect things, a time to declutter so you're not a hoarder, time to tear, time to sow. You see, but it's not always cut and dry like this. It's not always comfortable. And if you're an extrovert, the second half of verse 7 says there's a time for you to close your mouth. That one stung. And if you're an introvert, there's a time to speak up. Whether you want to or not. Once again, it's not what's comfortable, it's what's called for. It's not your preference, it's the weather that's there. The weather sets your dress, not you setting your dress and asking the seasons of life to confirm and conform to you. It's from this poem that there's a season for everything. And he asks a rhetorical question again. In verse 9, what are you getting out of it? There's seasons you're going through and there's work you're doing, and what are you getting out of it? The same thing that he said in chapter 1, he says again, you're not getting out of the work what you wished for. And once again in verse 10, he calls us to God. To God. Verse 10, I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. So you could say, you deal with everything for a season. And if you were so eloquent, you'd say there is a season and a reason. But I'm not that eloquent. So there is a pattern in verses 1 through 8, and there is a plan in verses 9 through 10. The first 8 verses shows you that life is just going to be unpredictable. It's going to happen like this. You're not going to want half of the things, but they're going to be there. And if that's where you stopped, in verses 1 through 8, you would then look at your life and the troubles and the struggles that you were in like random harassment. I mentioned my wife being pregnant almost 4 years ago. We would be sitting at a table or sitting on a couch, and all of a sudden she would twist to the side. And I'd be like, what are you doing? She's like, I didn't do it. You'd be talking to her and she'd grimace and you're like, what's happening? And as clueless as I am, like, it's an elbow to the bladder. It's a knee to the stomach. Over and over and over again. And when he wants to move, he moves, my friends. And I was like, so wait. So he basically harasses you day and night. You're in a constant fight from the inside. And she said, yeah, whenever I move to the right, he hates that. He hates that one. So she'd like move to the right and he'd take her to the left, if you know what I mean, take it back from there. You know what I mean? Like, that's what he would do. That's the stuff. And only in that moment, and now looking back in hindsight, it wasn't random harassment. There was a wild animal in there. An apex predator in training is what was in there. And unless we look at the trouble that we are dealing with in our life like that there is something that's going to come out of this or something that to be done with this, what we deal with will seem like random harassment. Random harassment. Why am I being picked on? Yeah, we're going through all of this, but nothing's coming. It's not going anywhere. But it is going somewhere. It is going somewhere. Verses 9 and 10, there is a plan. And what is that plan? It is from God, according to verse 10, and He has made everything beautiful in His time. So the struggles in your life are not random harassments. The seasons that you're going through are not insignificant. They are ordered specifically by the sovereignty of God. There is a time for you to be born. There is a time for you to die. There's a time to build up. There's a time to tear down. There's time for all of those things. And he said life is basically a short, meaningless vapor. Another reason why not to give up. Because God is making everything beautiful in His time. Which means, go back to that list, that means there is a beautiful birth. And a beautiful death. There's beautiful loss. And beauty that can be brought from war. There's beauty that can be brought from these things. God's in charge of the weather, is what we see here. The seasons of our life are changed by Him according to a plan of His to make not just some of those things, but all of those things beautiful in His time. So the real call to trust the Lord here in verses 9 and 10 is this letter in verse 11 that starts with an E. Everything. Everything. How many things is the Lord sovereign over? The answer is in verse 11. Everything. How many things does He work out to beauty? How many of them? All of them. Everything. He makes it that way. They might be ugly to start with. They might be ugly right now. They might be that way. Things might be ugly. But they won't always be that way. They won't always be ugly like that. My wife's naming and claiming verse 11 for me. That was a joke. But not really. He is making and working through absolutely everything. So there's seasons that change. And He's the season changer. And He is working all things toward our good. Paul says this in Romans, that He works all things for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. So basically, For the Christian, like let's get real specific, that's only who I'm talking to. He's working these things out for beauty. Like the Romans 8 is Ecclesiastes chapter 3 in the Old Testament way, right? Like, so how many things is he working together for your good? All of them. All of them. How many things is he working in Ecclesiastes 2? How many things is he working out to make beautiful? All of them. He's working all of these things out. That's the business that he's given us, and the business is to look to the giver of the business. The giver of the business. What we are describing is what one pastor put it, is the word providence. That's what we're talking about. The providence of God. We see that word used exactly in Genesis chapter 22, in which Abraham has been told to sacrifice his son Isaac. So he takes his son to the Mount Moriah, to the mount that God will provide on, and he asks him, Dad, where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And here's what Abraham said. God himself will provide a lamb. The original language, it means that God will literally see to it that the lamb is provided. He will literally see to it. He is providing, he is seeing to the seasons in your life. He's seeing to all of it. He's seeing to it. It may be ugly and you think he's not looking. You think he's not working. He is seeing to it and providing in all of these seasons and making all of these ugly, nasty, awful, dirty things. He is one day making them beautiful. In his time. In his time. That's what he's doing. Verse 11, he's made everything beautiful in his time. So for everything under the sun, there is a pattern, a plan, and a purpose in verses 11 through 15. You're going to have to deal with death, birth, killing, and war. But all of those things, even the bad ones, are from his hand. Are from his hand. This isn't godless toil under the sun he's describing, but the sovereign working of God in your life. It doesn't say that everything is beautiful. It said he has made everything beautiful in his time. He is working. And that's tough because in all of these seasons and experiences under the sun, they might not be the ones you would have picked. They might not have been the ones you've picked. They might not have been situations that you had wished on your worst enemy. You don't hate anybody bad enough to wish that they were in the situation that you find yourself in. What we see here is that there is a pattern, a plan, and a purpose of God in our struggles. In our struggles, right? So like you can look at we hear this birth, time for birth, we're all in, all for it. A time to die, then we need to look to the Lord and realize that he has purpose in death. His purpose is in death. You go down to verse 6, a time to seek and a time to lose. Like there's a purpose in your loss. There's a purpose in your loss. There's a purpose in your keeping. There's a purpose in your casting away. There's a purpose in the tearing and the sowing and the silence and the speaking. There's purpose in love and hate and war and peace. There's the purposes of God in all of those things. Some of those things are absolutely ugly. But there are the purposes of God in them. There can be a beautiful death, loss, and war as God transforms it. And he's told us how to respond to this in the second half of verse 11. So what do we do with that besides look at it that way? That he and trust that he's doing something, that there's a pattern of good and bad and coming, and then on the good days, realize that there's bad days to trust the Lord in ahead, and on the bad days, realize that there are good days ahead, maybe here, maybe in the world to come. This isn't a prosperity gospel, right? Like that there's some pretty nasty stuff going on here, and we have to trust the Lord that He's going to make these things beautiful. When and how and where He wants to be. And that could be in your glorified state. That could be in the life to come. That could be on the next one. But He's going to do it. So what do we do besides trust Him that there's a pattern and there's a plan, and trust Him that there's a purpose even when we can't see it? Well, look at the second half of verse 11. Also, He has put eternity into man's hearts, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So God is working in these situations, in these seasons, but He has put within us a desire for a world and a time that is not this one. That's what He's done. C.S. Lewis puts it like this in his book, Mere Christianity. He says, I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy. The most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Don't get caught up in this season. You weren't even made for this world. Don't get caught up in this season. You weren't even made for this world. Don't get caught up in death. You weren't even made for this world. Because God has placed in you a desire for the world to come, for a time that is not this one. And that desire is only fulfilled in Jesus Christ. So we look at these situations realizing that this life is a pattern of all of these experiences. But God has a plan and a purpose to do something in them. And a people, if we want to keep the Southern Baptist P thing going, and a people who were made for another world than this one. And that's what He's done for you. So in the here and now, you're going to have to deal with all of these things. But He's put eternity into your hearts. So He's going to make everything beautiful. And He's put a desire in you for a world that is not broken and fallen like this one. He's put that desire in you. And if you're a Christian, it's yours. For the Christian, it's yours. It's yours. He's doing something. And He's doing something in you, with you, and He's done something for you. He's placed eternity in your hearts. That's what He's done. He's brought us to the good, brought us to the bad, brought us through these seasons, making it beautiful. And He's put a desire in us for a place that He's taking us. The writer of Hebrews chapter 11 says, people who trust God know that they are strangers and exiles seeking another homeland, a land whose builder and maker is God. That is the land, my friend, that we desire. So we endure death and loss and mourning and war. He's in charge. He's making it beautiful. He's putting a desire in us for the beauty. So what do? Well, He gives us ways to respond to God's providence in this world in verses 12 through 15. 3 ways. Verse 12, we do His work. Look at how He words it in verse 12. I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and do good as long as they live. So we should have joy and do good no matter the season. We're still in the midst of a vapor. We have joy from God to do good to our neighbor. Second, to enjoy the little things in this world. Verse 13, he says to eat and drink and take pleasure in our work. It's God's gift. There will be tragedy. There will be triumph. The weather's going to change. Don't get caught up in it all. There are little things to enjoy along the way. There's little things to enjoy along the way. Take pleasure in what you're doing from God. We have joy in our work. It's God's gift. Verse 14, he says, what God does lasts forever. What God does, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken away from it. That's what he says in verse 14. So it's best if we make sure that, yes, we enjoy the little things in this world, but that the work that we do outlasts us. outlasts us. So yes, some things matter. Some things really don't matter at all. And some things matter eternally. Talking to a lot of parents in this room, like that you are pouring into people that will live past you, Lord willing. That will live past you, Lord willing. And they will go on without you. I'm not trying to break your heart. I'm just saying, like, you are sending things on ahead that matter in your kids. You're sending things that matter on in your kids and in your grandkids. That's what you're doing. Like you are making an impact that's going to outlive you in all likelihood. It's going to go on. So you better make sure that you're sharpening them, feeding them eternal things, because what God does lasts forever. What God does lasts forever. So we should do His work, enjoy the little things, and be in reverence, in awe of Him. Second half of verse 14 says that you might fear before Him. It's He who controls the weather, works in the storms to make them beautiful. That we honor Him, we reverence Him. I draw your attention back to our last Sunday night's discussion in a blog that I'll be posting shortly, I believe. We did it last Sunday night about the fear of the Lord. That doesn't mean like that you are scared of Him necessarily if you're a Christian. Like this is a fear that acknowledges Him in all things. That looks to Him first. That's what we do. So we do His work. So we make sure that we're investing in things, causes Christ, His church, our children, His causes in the world that live on past us. We enjoy the little things on the way. Take a minute, look around, take a breath, breathe. See what's around you. But above all, fear the Lord, for it is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. When you do that, once again, it calls you to look to God. That's what you do, but maybe that's not you. Maybe what you're struggling with is you grumble about the weather. You're standing there in your flip-flops in the 6 inches of snow talking about how awful these things are. No. We need to trust the Lord that He will make beautiful at one point and in one way very ugly things that are before us. And to trust a God who can paint a rainbow after a storm. That's what He's calling us to do. To trust Him no matter the weather, and trust Him who can paint a rainbow after a storm. Do you know how you know that God is doing this and will do this? Well, Romans 8 says we can know that God is working in all things. According to Romans 8:32, says He's proven it by giving us His only Son. That's how we can know that God is working things out to our good. Is He worked for us in giving us His Son. That's how we know. It says He's given us in His Son. How will He with Him not give us all things? That is the proof of the goodness of God, regardless of the weather, is God becoming a man in the person of Jesus Christ. Because God, who could have went on without us, is completely apart from His creatures. He became a man in Jesus, and He died on the cross after living the only perfect life, and He rose alive after death on the third day. It was a beautiful death. It was a beautiful loss. And it was the winning of the war by God Almighty. And He rose victorious over death on the third day in the person of Jesus. And God has given us His Son that we might trust solely in Him alone. God has given us the most precious of all, He's given us Jesus to take your sin, to live your life, to rise, and to save you. If you're not a Christian, turn from your sin and trust solely in the person of Jesus Christ to forgive you of your sin and to make you right with a holy God that you've offended. Because you tried your best to go your own way, but that was not good enough. For the wages of your sin, the paycheck on you trying your best to be a good person, the paycheck on that is death. The good news is that Jesus died your death in your place. And He offers you life in Him, for all time. If you are a Christian, look at what the Lord has done in His Son as proof of the beauty that He makes out of all things, as the way that He has a purpose in His world. He works it out perfectly. He does all things well, and He does all things right, and He does all things good. Trust Him when you don't like the weather. Let's pray. Father, we need You so that we'll have the humility to adapt to the seasons that we're in. Whether we have to give our keys away, whether we have to give our family member away, whether it's a time to be silent or a time to speak, You're in charge of it all. I pray for grace to trust You regardless of the weather. Forgive us for being grumblers, wearing our flip-flops in the snow. In Jesus' name, amen.